We got some Miami Dolphins news that we have to discuss. I'm Nick Roloff. This is Dolphins Today by Chat Sports because Tyreek Hill made a name for himself on social media once again by maybe dissing Tua Tagovailoa. We'll get into that. But also, ESPN released their post-NFL draft power rankings. Miami slipping a little bit. Is that justified? We'll talk about it. Before we get into today's show, I do want to make everyone aware that we will be live later today. If you're watching this on Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday morning, we'll be live at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Central Time. We go live every Tuesday, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel and have your notifications turned on to all, not just personalized, so you never miss a piece of content that we put out on the show. All right, this is what happened. So Tyreek Hill, as he is so famously good at social media, went on Snapchat, was answering some questions, and he was asked on who his top 5 QBs are in the National Football League. His answer, in no order, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Baker Mayfield, and Patrick Mahomes. There is obviously an omission on this list. That is his own quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa. He knows what he's doing, guys. And this isn't a live show. He was not asked this live on an interview. He was not asked this live on Instagram. This was a Snapchat question, which means, one, he does not have to answer it and make that video, and two, he obviously could have thought about what his answer would do, whether it is a diss at his current quarterback. He knew what not including Tagovailoa in his top 5 would do to Dolphins fans and overall media. And I will say, this isn't the craziest big deal of all time, but it is a slight change in public support for Tua, which sparked my intrigue, right? We have seen Tyreek Hill be asked this question over the last 2.5 years since he became a member of the Dolphins by media members, by people on Instagram. And I would say consistently, 90%, 95, maybe even this is the first time ever, he has not included Tua in his top 5 QB list. So I do wonder why the change in public opinion, or at least public support, happened. And that is why we talk about these things here at the channel. But I want to know your one-word reaction to Tyreek Hill not including Tua in his top 5 QB list. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. My one word, childish. That is the only way I can describe Tyreek Hill's actions this offseason, but also not including Tua in his top 5 quarterbacks list. Is Tua a top 5 QB in the NFL? No. Is he a top 5 QB in the AFC? Still no. But you have to back your quarterback publicly. I do not care. Your quarterback could be Tyler Shuck from the Saints. You have to back him. Just like you saw Cam Ward, before he even got drafted by the Titans, say that his top 5 wide receivers in the NFL included Calvin Ridley and Treylon Burks. And his top 5 running backs were Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard. You just support your teammates. Especially when I look at Tyreek Hill's best 4 seasons in his career, I think 2 of his 4 are the last 2, or let's say 2 of the 3 years he's been in Miami. In 2023, in 2022. In 2023, by the way, that offseason before this past year, remember, he was voted the best player in all of football. To me, he's played 3 years in Miami. And he's played 8+ years in the NFL. 2 of his best seasons are with Tua and the Dolphins. So why is he not supporting the dude who got him 1,700 yards and 20 touchdowns over the past couple of years? I don't get it. But this goes back to a larger discussion about Tyreek Hill's spot on this Miami Dolphins roster. Is he, in a vacuum, an elite football player, an elite wide receiver? There's no debating that. But I've wanted Tyreek Hill traded for a long time. I'm just simply sick of the distractions, him being a talking point, and the lack of his leadership in this group. And if you are relying on your wide receiver one to be a leader, that's probably an issue in its own right, regardless of what team you are. But maybe if you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Mike Evans, that's the one difference here. But in general, wide receivers don't make the best leaders. But the issue is Miami doesn't have any leaders on this roster for the most part, and their coaching staff and head coach isn't a good culture builder either. He just is a smart offensive mind. But I do want to trade Tyreek. I've been saying that for a while. I'm sick of it. The off-the-field distractions and concerns there are very valid as well. I think you just move forward with Jalen Waddle as your wide receiver one, recoup what you get from Hill, and then just go forward and wipe your hands clean. Like, I can't believe we're in a world where we're trading Jalen Ramsey but not trading Tyreek Hill. I just don't get that. But let's move on, and we're going to talk about the ESPN NFL Power Rankings post-draft. They labeled the biggest improvement for every team and ranked all 32 NFL squads. Miami came in at number 20 on the NFL's Power Ranking, which is actually down 2. What do I mean by that? Well, after the NFL free agency period, ESPN had them as the 18th best team in the NFL. After the draft, they took a dive down to 20, which I don't really completely understand considering Miami, with their first 3 picks, addressed defensive line and Kenneth Grant, biggest need. Offensive line in that final starting guard spot in Jonah Savinaya, big need. And then defensive line again because they needed more depth at that position as well. We'll talk about that here in just a second, but make sure you get your Dolphins jerseys today at chatsports.com/Dolphins jersey. Any color, any player, any style, Waddle. You can get Tyreek Hill. You can get Kenneth Grant, Tua Tagovailoa, maybe even a little Zach Sealer action, who arguably is the best player on the Miami Dolphins. I thought he was last season. Either way, one more time, chatsports.com/Dolphins jersey. Links in the description and comments of today's video. So in this article where ESPN had the power rankings, they ranked every team and then labeled each position that was improved the most. For Miami, no surprise, it was defensive line. Also, very hard to not be the most improved position, considering that going into the NFL draft, they had 2 people on the roster, Sealer and Benito Jones. Here's what ESPN said, saying by default, the Dolphins' most improved position has to be the one they addressed 3 times in the draft. Defensive tackle. First-round pick Kenneth Grant should start in Week 1 alongside Zach Sealer, while 5th-round pick Jordan Phillips should provide rotational depth early in his career. 7th-round pick Zeke Biggers is a raw but 6'6", 320 pounds, big enough to turn into a force at nose tackle. Miami's defensive line required immediate improvement entering the draft, and GM Chris Grier accomplished that. And now, is it the best room of all time? No, but I think it's an adequate room now. And although some brain-dead national pundits like Mel Kiper will flame the Dolphins for taking Kenneth Grant at 13, I think this is a player that has a lot of upside. He's got big size, 6'4", 330, an explosive first step, high character, high motor, guy that you want in this locker room. He pairs up with Sealer nicely. Benito Jones was a solid one-tech nose tackle last season for Miami. You get Zeke Biggers and Jordan Phillips to work in with them. And then you kept a couple veteran future contracts, Neil Farrell, Matt Dickerson, added UDFA, Alex Huntley. The truth is this. Yes, cornerback was not addressed to a full capacity in the draft. But everybody, including myself, said that defensive line was the biggest need for the Fins going into the late April draft. Well, they accomplished the goal of rounding out this room by drafting 3 guys. How am I going to complain about that? But some people will go out there and complain about Miami adding 3 defensive linemen. But let's get back to the actual power rankings and stop talking about the D linemen. Some fans might see the Dolphins ranked 20th out of 32 and be upset. Gotta be honest, I'm not going to be one of those people. And maybe I am not that optimistic about the Fins this upcoming year due to concerns about the roster, the secondary, and overall improvements from other teams in the AFC and NFL. But I'm just not that up in arms raising the pitchforks about being ranked 20th. And I'll kind of explain why here in a second. But I want to know your thoughts. Fill in the blank for me. Dolphins are the blank best team in the National Football League. ESPN had us at 20. Where do you have the Dolphins ranked? Let me know your thoughts. But I wanted to dumb it down because who cares about the NFC if we're going to be completely honest? All we care about is the AFC because that's who we got to compete with to make the playoffs and then ultimately potentially make a Super Bowl. Well, if you take away the NFC teams, Miami came in at 9 on the AFC Power Rankings. And I just don't know how I'm supposed to be upset about this ranking. Like, sure, could you argue Miami and Pittsburgh? Yeah, absolutely. As it currently stands, the Steelers don't have a quarterback. Yeah, it's likely going to be Aaron Rodgers, but what if he retires and they're stuck with, who did they draft? Will Howard or Mason Rudolph? Like, stink. How are we supposed to be put ahead the 7 teams that made the playoffs last year? Right? Like, the Bengals didn't make the playoffs, but they're put ahead into that 4th spot, which is a little bit aggressive. But we all knew this. Like, we all knew going into this season, Miami is going to be fighting for a wild card spot. They're not going to be better than the Bills next year. So you can cross out winning the division, even though we had hopes of winning the division last year. Not going to happen, I don't think. So you'll be fighting with the up-and-coming New England Patriots, the Pittsburgh Steelers with Aaron Rodgers, the Denver Broncos who made the playoffs last year with Bo Nix as a rookie, the Chargers who made it last year, and Cincinnati who narrowly missed and will be trying to make it this year. Like, you are in that cluster of teams 7 through 10 or 11 in the AFC. So to me, it's a fair ranking from ESPN, and you have to prove them wrong because you have not been able to win meaningful games as of late the past 3 years with Mike McDaniel. So to me, it's a fair ranking, as hard as it might be to acknowledge that. And then when you factor in as well the Jalen Ramsey questions with this roster, like, how do we expect this team to be able to make noise in the AFC playoffs? Are they doing the right thing for long-term building? Absolutely. They addressed offensive line and free agency. They have, if everything goes right, they're starting O-line for this season and next year. Daniels 3-year contract. Patrick Paul rookie contract, 3 years remaining. Savinaya rookie this year. Aaron Brewer's got this year and next year left. And Austin Jackson's got multi-years left on his deal. So you addressed offensive line to the right degree, and this hopefully is the group for multiple years. You address the defensive line on the trenches with rookie players. You still have Zach Sealer. So long-term, you did what was necessary to build out a good roster in the trenches, which is where everything begins, as we saw with the Philadelphia Eagles. The secondary is what is the biggest question mark and is what is ultimately going to hold this team back in making the playoffs or even winning a playoff game. God forbid they actually made the playoffs. That will do it for this show. Appreciate everybody for tuning in and watching this edition of Dolphins Today. Make sure you do join us for our live show later today if you're watching on Tuesday. If you didn't and you missed it, well, make sure you're subscribed and turn on your notifications so you don't miss it in the future.